What constitutes a just war has been debated for thousands of years. Some assert that warfare is never justified in any scenario, while others, believing there are certain situations where it is un- undeniably warranted, reject this view. War. What's the best way to win an armrest war when I'm sitting in the middle seat on a plane? I think a relationship is like a game of tug of war. Justified. I know he was pretty rude to you, but I don't think slapping him was justified. Don't try to justify every mistake you make. I think experience and knowledge are the only textbooks that teach you how to draw a success scenario of your business. Certain. I'm certain that everything will be okay in the end. I can't predict the score with certainty, but I'm fairly sure our team will win pretty easily. Undenia- Undeniably. I admit he's undeniably charismatic, but to be honest with you, I don't really understand what he's trying to say half the time. There's no denying that this shot is good quality, but it's a bit too pricey. He's still in denial, denial about the breakup with his ex-girlfriend. Warranted. Do you think capital punishment for littering is warranted? This movie definitely warrants a second viewing. I paid extra $200 for a 3-year warranty. Reject. What should I do if I still love a boy who has rejected me before? Opponents of warfare under any circumstance typically argue that war is expensive and traumatic and causes unnecessary loss of life, so it must be avoided. They also claim it leads to social issues such as internally displaced people and refugees. Expensive. Studying in the US is very expensive, but there are a lot of scholarships you can apply for. John's jokes are always at somebody's expense. Dramatic. My parents' divorce was a traumatic event for me, but I'm coping okay now. I'm very sorry for your loss. Your departure is going to be a great loss for the company, but as a friend, I wish you all the best at your next job. I don't know how, but I managed to lose both of my socks in the wash over the weekend. Why is he dating a loser like him? I'm trying to avoid my ex, but it's pretty hard since we walk on the same floor. My car accidents are entirely avoidable internally. We'll discuss this internally and get back to you. The lecture was so boring that I was internally screaming. Displaced. Thankfully, even though thousands of people were displaced by the tsunami, no lives were lost. Refugee. My parents came to this country as refugees and managed to make a life for themselves. On the other hand, those of the opinion that war can be justified often cite provocation, infringement of a country's sovereignty, and another country abusing its power to commit crimes against its own citizens as just causes to wage war. Cite. It sucks that my report was turned down just because I forgot to cite references. Provocation. He loses control at the slightest provocation. This guy is always trying to provoke people on Twitter. Infringement. Uploading someone's line conversation onto Twitter is a complete infringement of their privacy, isn't it? I didn't mean to infringe on copyright. Abuse. Isn't getting your secretary to pick up your dry cleaning an abuse of power? It's not like I committed a crime or something, so I don't know why she's so mad at me. If you really want to pass the exam, you have to commit yourself to studying. I have a lot of work commitments today. He made a commitment not to touch his smartphone until he's done with the test, so he won't reply back anytime soon. You'll never find somebody more committed to the team than me. The thought that my boyfriend may not be committed to our relationship is worrying me. Citizen. Do you want to be a Canadian citizen or just a permanent resident? Wage. The convenience store chain has decided to wage a war on waste by offering food that is close to expiration to homeless people. Both sides generally agree that there are rules and codes of ethics that should not be violated in times of war, such as bans on violence against civilians and vulnerable populations, including the elderly, injured, and sick. Rule. I generally obey the rules unless they don't make sense. Do you think robots will rule the world in the future? Violate. I hate Tom violates my personal space all the time. If you quit, you'll be in violation of our agreement. The main responsibility of the police is to protect civilians. Vulnerable. Personally, I find boys who show their vulnerable side more attractive. We need to make sure that we minimize vulnerabilities in our software. Elderly. Don't you think elderly people these days are much healthier than they were 50 years ago? Injured. We have a lot of injured players on our team, but our performance hasn't been that bad so far. Be careful not to injure yourself when you are using that chainsaw. Make sure you stretch before exercising to prevent injury. It looks like a nasty injury, but it's not too painful. Sick. I feel a bit sick today, so I work from here home. I'm pretty sick of Sophia's negative attitude. There's been an obvious increase in proliferation of weapons, tyranny, and protests and riots around the world over the last few years, which leads me to conclude that a full-scale war is inevitable. Where do you predict the next major war will happen? Given that we live in such a chaotic political landscape, I think it's really hard to anticipate where or when the next big war is going to break out with any real precision. What do you think will cause the next major conflict? There are hypotheses that it could be due to a new nuclear arms race or a competition to colonize space. But what's your opinion? I'm certain that the next major hostilities will be over neutral resources. They are becoming increasingly vital, but diminishing at a rapid rate. So less affluent countries will have incentives incentives to report to violence to get them. Diplomatic solutions such as economics sanctions are unlikely to be effective in these situations.